Hello, I'm Eunjae Kim for We Learn to Share, and the concept that I'll be dealing with today is utilitarianism.
Utilitarianism was a theory that has been discussed by many different philosophers, and therefore each theory varies in many ways. But there are a few things that most utilitarianism theories hold in general. The first concept that distinguishes utilitarianism is that if an action brings the most good, then it is considered moral. Another important point of utilitarianism is that it focuses on the consequences. As a form of consequentialism, if the consequence is considered right or moral, then so is the process. Now let's take a look at the two most classic approaches to utilitarianism. The first philosopher that we'll be looking at is Jeremy Bentham, an English philosopher who lived throughout the mid-18th to mid-19th century. According to Bentham's definition, a good or an approved action is an action that encourages or brings pleasure and happiness. And on the other hand, a bad or a disapproved action would be actions that bring pain. Now, I've mentioned earlier that utilitarianism seeks to bring the most good, right? And he defined good as something that brings pleasure and happiness. Applying this, it will mean that his theory would always try to maximize pleasure. But how? What distinguishes Bentham's utilitarianism from others is that he proposed what is called a quantity utilitarianism. Bentham argued that values such as pleasure and happiness could be calculated and that an individual would be able to know how much pleasure and pain an action brings to oneself. He also added that that same individual would also be able to calculate how much pleasure and pain that same action gives to different individuals. This will lead to the calculation of the pleasure and pain the whole society feels for an action, and seeking the pleasure of the most people would be possible. Also, he explained that although there might be differences between the quantity of pleasures, there are no differences in the quality of pleasures. As mentioned earlier in the video, Bentham's utilitarianism has the characteristics of consequentialism. And now let's try to solve the trolley problem using his. Let's say that you're the driver, driving a train down the tracks. Then you realize that there are 5 people on the track, and if the train continues to go straight, then they will die. You quickly search for another way. Then you see another one. However, that track also has people on it, but only 2. Would you choose the first track that will lead to the death of 5, or the second one that will lead to the death of 2? Those people cannot get off the track, and there is no option such as stopping the train. How would Bentham act in such a situation? Let's add a condition that all those 7 people on the track have the same conditions. They're all normal citizens and have the same amount of people that would be sad if they die. If this was the case, then Bentham would have chosen the second track, because calculating the pain that each choice would bring, killing 2 would bring less pain compared to killing 5. And calculating the pleasure each choice would bring, saving 5 would bring more pleasure than saving 2. Let's change things up a little bit here. In the second situation, there are still only 2 choices, with 5 on one and 2 on another. However, there is a new information given to you, that 5 people on the track are criminals. If this is the case, then Bentham would change his answer. He would say that you should choose the first track and should kill the 5 criminals. Why? Killing 5 criminals would still bring pain because there are people who would be sad if they die. However, Bentham believes that the amount of pain that saving 5 criminals is much bigger. This is because he also considered the amount of pain that is brought to the society due to the crimes they committed after being saved. The next philosopher that we'll be looking at is John Stuart Mill, who is also an English philosopher who lived in the 19th century. His utilitarianism is quite different from Bentham's. Mill's definition on good is still pleasure or a state without pain. His theory on good is also called as hedonism, which came from a Greek word hedoni, which means pleasure. Mill's utilitarianism still tries to maximize pleasure. But what's different is that he came up with a theory called quality utilitarianism. Bentham stood for quantity utilitarianism and Mill stood for quality utilitarianism, quantity and quality. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that Bentham's opinion on pleasure was that only difference in quantity exists, and the differences in quality doesn't. However, Mill argued that differences in quality does exist. For Mill, intellectual pleasures are considered more valuable than just sensual pleasures. As Mill explains, that sensual pleasures can be experienced by anyone, but intellectual pleasures can only be experienced by the educated few. Also, compared to the idea of Bentham that every individual is capable of calculating one's quantity of pleasure and pain, Mill claimed that only those who have experienced both intellectual and sensual pleasures are capable of comparing those. Utilitarianism has been trying to maximize good of the society, and their goal was to satisfy the general interest or the majority. When I first learned this concept of utilitarianism, one type of a political system came across my head: democracy. Let me give you a brief explanation on democracy. Democracy is a form of a government that the people have the authorities, and those powers are exercised through a system of representation, which is usually election. There are two types of democracies: direct democracy and representative democracy. A direct democracy is where citizens directly participate in the government. It has been widely used between ancient Greek city-states. However, it has the limit that it is challenging for a group of large population to practice direct democracy. The second one is representative democracy. This is where citizens elect a representative, and that representative directly participates in the government. Since representative democracy can be effectively used over a large population, it is widely used. In the current system of elections, all citizens are given the same amount of vote, despite all differences. This is where we can see Bentham's utilitarianism, where there is no difference in quality, so everyone is equal, and the government tries to satisfy the larger quantity, or the majority. Mill, with his theory of quality utilitarianism, he actually proposed that there should be a difference between the number of votes an educated individual gets and the number of votes a normal citizen gets. He proposed for weighted voting. Today, we looked at the concept of utilitarianism and the two most classic approaches to it. Whose theory sounded more interesting for you? Was it Bentham's or was it Mill's? That's it for today. If this video was helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching and see you in another video. Bye!